On the morning of September 11, 2001, 19 men armed with box cutters directed by a man on dialysis in a cave fortress halfway around the world using a satellite phone and a laptop directed the most sophisticated penetration of the most heavily defended airspace in the world, overpowering the passengers and the military combat-trained pilots on 4 commercial aircraft before flying those planes wildly off course for over an hour without being molested by a single fighter interceptor. These 19 hijackers, devout religious fundamentalists who like to drink alcohol, snort cocaine, and live with pink-haired strippers, managed to knock down 3 buildings with 2 planes in New York, while in Washington, a pilot who couldn't handle a single-engine Cessna was able to fly a 757 in an 8,000-foot descending 270-degree corkscrew turn to come exactly level with the ground, hitting the Pentagon in the budget analyst office where DoD staffers were working on the mystery of the $2.3 trillion that Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld had announced missing from the Pentagon's coffers in a press conference the day before, on September 10th, 2001. Luckily, the news anchors knew who did it within minutes.
Osama bin Laden.
The pundits knew within hours.
Osama bin Laden.
The administration knew within the day.
Terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them.
And the evidence literally fell into the FBI's lap.
That a hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
But for some reason, a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists demanded an investigation into the greatest attack on American soil in history. That investigation was delayed, underfunded, set up to fail, a conflict of interest, and a cover-up from start to finish. It was based on testimony extracted through torture, the records of which were destroyed. It failed to mention the existence of WTC 7, Able Danger, PNAC, Sibel Edmonds, OBL and the CIA, and the drills of hijacked aircraft being flown into buildings that were being simulated at the precise same time that those events were actually happening. It was lied to by the Pentagon, the CIA, the Bush administration, and as for Bush and Cheney, well, no one knows what they told it because they testified in secret, off the record, not under oath, and behind closed doors. It didn't bother to look at who funded the attacks because that question is ultimately of little practical significance. Still, the 9/11 Commission did brilliantly answering all of the questions the public had, except most of the victims' family members' questions, and pinned blame on all the people responsible, although no one so much as lost their job, determining the attacks were
failure of imagination.
Because
Nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings.
Except the Pentagon, FEMA, NORAD, and the NRO. The DIA destroyed 2.5 terabytes of data on Able Danger, but that's okay because it probably wasn't important. The SEC destroyed their records on the investigation into the insider trading before the attacks, but that's okay because destroying the records of the largest investigation in SEC history is just part of routine record keeping. NIST has classified the data that they used for their model of WTC 7's collapse, but that's okay because knowing how they made their model of the collapse would jeopardize public safety. The FBI has argued that all material related to their investigation of 9/11 should be kept secret from the public, but that's okay because the FBI probably has nothing to hide. This man never existed, nor is anything he had to say worthy of your attention, and if you say otherwise, you are a paranoid conspiracy theorist and deserve to be shunned by all of humanity. Likewise him, and her. And her, and her, and him. Osama bin Laden lived in a cave fortress in the hills of Afghanistan, but somehow got away. Then he was hiding out in Tora Bora, but somehow got away. Then he lived in Abbottabad for years, taunting the most comprehensive intelligence dragnet employing the most sophisticated technology in the history of the world for a decade, releasing video after video with complete impunity and getting younger and younger as he did so, before finally being found in a daring SEAL team raid which wasn't recorded on video, in which he didn't resist or use his wife as a human shield, and in which these crack special forces operatives panicked and killed this unarmed man, supposedly the best source of intelligence about those dastardly terrorists on the entire planet. Then they dumped his body in the ocean before telling anyone about it. Then a couple dozen of that team's members died in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. This is the story of 9/11, brought to you by the media which told you the hard truths about
his head could be seen to move violently forward.
And
they took the babies out of the incubators.
And
mobile production facilities.
And
the rescue of Jessica Lynch.
If you have any questions about this story, you are a batshit paranoid tinfoil dog-abusing baby hater and will be reviled by everyone. If you love your country and or freedom, happiness, rainbows, rock and roll, puppy dogs, apple pie, and your grandma, you will never ever express doubts about any part of this story to anyone. Ever. This has been a public service announcement by the Friends of the FBI, CIA, NSA, DIA, SEC, MSM, White House, NIST, and the 9/11 Commission. Because ignorance is strength.
What's up, revolutionaries? DC with you here on Project Sanity, a very special broadcast, a special show here on 9/11. I've convinced my cohorts to join me today and discuss the 15th anniversary that the History Channel will call it 15 Septembers later in their yearly installment of the propaganda. And it took a little convincing, not much really, but a little convincing to get my cohorts together today and put a little maybe sanity into the conversation about 9/11 and the narrative. We have a big thing on this show about narrative, so we're going to talk a little bit about the narrative, which you just saw thanks to James Corbett of the Corbett Report. I don't know if you are familiar with James, but I'll have his website up here in a minute. But and he may be joining us actually in this hour, possibly. We'll see. We pulled this show together a little. We do a lot haphazardly here on Project Sanity because we're just putting it all together. And we've got. I'm going to bring them up here. I had it all ready to go, and here they are. Here are my partners in this crime today. Playing on Project Sanity is Richard Green, a regular co-host here and creator of Project Sanity, as well as Eric Miller up there in Tacoma, Washington. Is that correct? No, I'm sorry, Olympia. You're in Olympia. Adair's in Tacoma. Very good. Sorry, my friend. But you're all up in Washington, right? You're all up in the great state of Washington. And I thank you guys for joining me today. Richard, Eric, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that was, of course, what we saw there was a video came out a number of years ago, I think a few years ago, by the Corbett Report. James Corbett put that out. He started his website in 2004 or 2007. He's been in Japan since 2004, but he started his website in 2007, and he basically is an independent journalist, trying to break the corporate media lock on information, and puts out a lot of really good information that some would call conspiracy theory in some mainstream circles, in many circles actually, but also was a creation of the CIA. We all know the term conspiracy theory was created by the theorists, and that really is ultimately part of the show today, is that we are being asked to believe a conspiracy theory that we just saw. That 19 guys hijacked 4 planes and flew them into buildings, across the most heavily guarded and protected airspace on the planet. So just welcome, gentlemen. I know I've dragged you into this. And Eric, you have some background. Eric's like, no, yeah, I know, I'm on board, man. I'm on board. I know, we both questioned this story from the very beginning. Richard, what's your story a little bit about what's your concept of this narrative? What's your thoughts on this narrative and some of the alternate possibilities that people are talking about?
I guess I do want to start just because we all deal with the trauma of 9/11 in different ways, and I know people have a lot of different opinions about what transpired and how to feel about the victims that were most clearly the victims of this attack. And so I just want to, it's 15 years later, but, for all those families, my I guess, best feelings or whatever towards them, and that I don't mean in any way to be disrespectful or to be dismissive of anything that they went through as in the transpiring of our conversation.
Well, that's certain. I mean, that certainly is a reasonable comment, and I'm remiss by not remembering that. I mean, much of this research. I'm a little nervous that we have 2 amazing guests today about this subject, the subject that I've been very interested in for a long time. But Richard, you're absolutely right. A lot of this research comes from people who suffered the tragedy of 9/11 and refused to give up to find the truth. So absolutely, I mean, it's part of how they got us or getting us. There's talk today about how the FBI was heard saying that they still didn't do enough. They still didn't kill enough people, to get really on people on board this plan of global, hegemony. But all rumors. But absolutely, these people did die. There were many people that died on 9/11, and I think that has a lot to do with why people don't really want to look, maybe, at the truth or even look for the truth. Based on the tragedy and their feelings for it.
Yeah, and to kind of address the question that you asked, I guess my current position on 9/11. I guess I'm probably going to fall as more skeptical of what we're going to be hearing today than either of you two, but I also am skeptical of the story I've been told about what happened on 9/11, and as was laid out in the video that we opened with, some of the subsequent events. And for me, having the opportunity to be able to look over the last 15 years of what's transpired, what's come out, rather than in the immediate moment of 9/11 and then the post afterwards and the consolidation and patriotism and all that kind of stuff, without that cloak around what actually transpired, being able to take a more sober look at what happened, both on 9/11, before it, and then in the 15 years since. And so that's what I'm particularly interested in that. And then I've been also doing some research on the World Trade Center Building 7, which I think we're going to be talking about later on in the show. That it's raised some interesting questions for myself that I haven't been answered to my satisfaction.
Well, Trade Center 7 has always really been the smoking gun for me. I even would say for the last number of years, I would say, okay, I'll buy your Trade Center, your Twin Towers story, but I can't buy what's going on at World Trade Center 7. And yeah, we're going to be talking to Ted Walter, a representative of the architects and engineers for Truth about 9/11 in our 6:30 to 7 half hour. So let people know that he's going to be joining us, and he's going to give us an update on the current state of that. Their effort and what they're looking at. They're trying to look at the whole picture, of course, but what is the most obvious is World Trade Center 7. And there is currently a new study going on, relatively new. It's a 2-year study going on up at the University of Alaska. So we have a little video I'll show about that. But and we'll talk to him later. But Eric, where do you come from? And I know you and I sort of were from the very beginning questioning it and gave it up a little bit. So where are you at this today and on this 15th September?
So again, I know we've kind of hashed over it already, but I would like to say that none of what I believe at all is to say that the victims of this tragedy are not victims, and that my condolences do not lie with them. So first of all, I just have to get that out as well. But Dave, I go back and forth, man. There's a lot of times, I've studied this a lot, and to be honest, the data and evidence all shows me that the truther movement has truth to it. But the government tells me that I'm crazy, and everybody around me tells me that I'm crazy. And it's one of those situations that even though I'm looking at the data and the evidence that shows me, okay, well, this had to have been an act that was more organized than a couple of guys who couldn't speak English and had no income that suddenly came into our country and were able to pull off one of the biggest terrorist attacks in our country's history. Questionably the biggest terrorist attack, because Pearl Harbor was an act of war. So it's been difficult for me to decide really where I stand. I know for sure that I don't believe what the government has fed to us. I don't believe what mainstream media has fed to us. I know that there's answers out there that we still have not been given. I know that, sorry. So, thought I heard myself for a second there. But I know that for some reason in the 9/11 report, they chose to not release the pages that included Saudi Arabia until the last few months. So almost 15 years after the incident occurred. I know that, as you kind of touched on already, Dave, that building number 7 is the biggest question of all. I know that my grandpa worked at Boeing, and even as an evangelical Christian conservative, he has verified that there is no way a Boeing 747 fit through that hole in the Pentagon. I know that the location of the Pentagon that was hit just happened to be where they were trying to, as pointed out in the video that you showed before we started talking, just happened to be where they were doing the research, trying to figure out where the trillions of dollars disappeared.
Where the money went.
So I guess a better summarization of how I feel about all this. I feel like there's more answers to what the truthers have to say than what the mainstream media has to say.
Well, that's, I think, part of how they get us to look away.
the truther, the whole truther label. That's a psyop. It just looks like a psyop. It's basically anybody who is how is seeking the truth become a crazy concept?
Yeah.
Right? They're just a truther.
We're seeing it reinforced in our current campaigns, but I don't want to diverge too much. But
well, it's they're both bought and paid for. This was part of and just Donald Trump in his foreign policy speech he gave right before the forum. He's basically laid out, we need to get everybody get on board with their GDP, buying military. We need to buy more ships, increase this, increase that. So the neocons have him right there. He's like, here you go. This is what we want. And so he's got, they're getting him in there. But Hillary is, bought and paid for neocon. And we're going to war, and they're setting us up. Just look. It's a one long trail from 1979 and the invasion of Afghanistan by the Soviet Union, the draw-in of Afghanistan, all the way to where we're at today. And ISIS is at the very end of that trail that was paid for, trained, fomented all the way along with the CIA. We're fighting. Al-Qaeda is fighting ISIS in Aleppo. Poor Gary Johnson. Obviously got way too high before he went on Morning Joe that morning. And he's like, dude, what's Aleppo? I don't know. So we have, it's the CIA fighting the FBI in Syria. And, we're arming the good rebels, which always turn out to be more, the moderate rebels, which always turn out to be bad guys. Where do they get their money? And their equipment? We gave it to them. Whether they stole it from the Iraqi army or, we gave it to them. So, and, Aleppo is just the next mainstream media spin to get us into the war, We're bombing kids all over the place. I can find a bunch of pictures of Gaza right now, too. We got kids sitting on brick covered in dust, all kinds of video of that. So, we're killing kids everywhere, this military machine. And, so Aleppo is just the next, teeing us up, just like they teed us up for Iraq, and we can go back to them, stealing the election even, So, but I digress. We are here to talk about, less conspiratorial things, and we can expand, of course. But let's focus a little bit on Building 7. We know we've been, this is sort of something. Well, here's a couple of assumptions. Let's make a couple of assumptions, guys. A crime was committed on 9/11.
Correct.
Can we assume that?
Yes.
That this was a crime that was committed?
One way or another, yep.
It certainly was a crime up until the time they attacked the Pentagon, because that's basically when it became an act of war.
Yes.
And as a matter of fact, that's one of the theories, is that they couldn't have attacked, they couldn't have gotten everybody involved unless the Pentagon was attacked, a military target was attacked, because then it could actually be an act of war and yada, yada. Funny you mentioned Pearl Harbor, which is exactly what the Project for a New American Century needed in order to do what they're doing. So that was speaking of narrative, that was a narrative that was very much going on in the early months of the Bush administration, during confirmation hearings, doing a lot of things. They were talking Pearl Harbor, Pearl Harbor, Pearl Harbor. So, prima facie evidence. So here we have a crime that essentially has had no real investigation. I think another assumption we can make, and even the commissioners on the 9/11 Commission say that their report was underfunded, they tried to stop it at every angle, and that it was basically a whitewash. Even they admit to that. So we basically have a crime that has not been properly investigated. Would we agree on that?
I agree, totally.
Well, go ahead, Richard.
I think that's a reasonable. I can't say that I'm fully aware of the depth of the investigation, but I think it certainly wasn't reported in a way that I think detailed it.
So here's
to the level that you're.
Well, they even admit to it. Like FEMA's like, we don't know. We're going to leave it to NIST. NIST finally had to admit they fell, free fall. So, and the commission basically says, this was not complete. They don't even touch Building 7, which is, really interesting. Go ahead, Eric.
So, yeah.
Well, I just wanted to point out with normal investigations, you don't start the investigation off with a person, with one single person or one single group or one single country. With most criminal investigations, in order for the investigation to be fair and to make sure that you're finding all the facts, you don't start off with just one person or one country. And that's what we've done here with 9/11. It was always, the Taliban or Al Qaeda or you know, I even forget who their target was in this particular instance. But the investigation did not leave things open for anything other than who they were targeting and who they already assumed in the end.
Right.
So instead of actually investigating what happened, what the investigation did was try to find clues that made their story more viable, rather than actually investigating what happened.
Which is what they did to get us into Iraq. So it's like it's the MO is right there, you know. And actually, that is the case. We know that Zelikow, I think that's how you pronounce his name, who basically took over for Kissinger as the chairman of the 9/11 Commission, which was a joke. He basically was worse because nobody really knew about him. That he'd actually written this story of the trade towers being hit in 1998, but he basically had an outline of how the commission report would be, and we know this now, that there was an outline that basically said this is what it's going to be, guys, fill in the blanks, and that's basically what they did. They had an assumption that this is what the story is, and we need to find the evidence that's going to plug that in, and the evidence they have for 7, no wonder they didn't put Building 7 in the damn report, is because the evidence is blatantly wrong. So I'm going to go to, let's go to this video. I need a little water because, you know, I'm talking like crazy. But let me go to this video. This is about a funny statistic on 9/11 is that recently a poll was done, I don't know the exact date, but that 42% of Americans did not know that Building 7, a third building, came down in Manhattan.
You say a third?
42%.
Wait,
40%.
no.
Okay.
Oh, wait. I thought Richard was just like, wait, a third building fell down? I'm like, Richard, you didn't know a third building fell down?
The one we're talking about. Yeah.
You're like a smart person, man. I know you're smarter than I am. I mean,
I was distracted by Dave putting the video up, so I didn't hear the actual number, the percentage, and so I was like, a third. That sounds pretty good. Like if it was only a third of us weren't aware.
No, yeah, almost half.
Still
42%.
Not that bad as I would think in general for the American population, but I think that shows that what happened on 9/11, although we're told never to forget, we didn't really even know in the first place.
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Oh, no, we didn't know anything. I mean, they got that evidence out of there so fast. The video of Giuliani's the dump trucks. He bragging about how they got 120 dump trucks of stuff out because he wanted to open up downtown. Great investigation, guys. Not one investigative principle was followed in this crime, whether it be a crash of an airplane or the collapse of a building. Every evidential and step of investigation was completely disregarded, and 9/11. So let's go to that. I'm going to go to that video, and I'm going to get.
Before you play the video, I just wanted to say that's actually an important point that you bring up
go
about investigation. Essentially, the downtown New York was a murder scene.
Yes.
And you as you pointed out, he was bragging about removing 120 tons of evidence.
Yep.
Yes.
Well, that's one of the. We're going to play another video, and if James joins us, we'll talk about it. But he has a series out this week about 9/11 suspects, alternative suspects to 9/11 of who were behind this. And Giuliani's one of them. Maybe we'll play that if we have for a little break. We'll give us all a break. But I want to watch this one. This is it's about a 5-minute video, but this is basically this is the official Rethink 9/11 video, and here we go.
At approximately 5:20 p.m., fell on 9/11. Did you know that a third tower fell on 9/11? At approximately 5:20 p.m. on September 11, 2001, World Trade Center Building 7 collapsed in 6.5 seconds from normal office fires, according to the government's final report.
World Trade Center 7 collapsed because of fires fueled by office furnishings. It did not collapse from explosives or from fuel oil fires.
Later, the government finally admitted that Building 7 collapsed at the rate of free fall after trying to deny it. So what's wrong with a building in free fall? What is free fall?
It's just like taking your car keys out and just dropping them. That's how fast the building came down, for over 100 feet.
This is high school physics.
A building cannot do free fall with 40,000 tons of structural steel in its structural system without it being blown up.
The only way that a building can accelerate as it collapses is by having pre-engineered, precisely timed, and precisely placed explosives. In other words, controlled demolition.
Normal office fires not only dropped a steel-framed skyscraper for the first time in history, and did so at free fall, according to the government's report. They also burned hot enough to create the molten metal observed at ground zero.
You'd get down below and you'd see molten steel running down the channel rails, like you're in a foundry.
In an office fire, you cannot generate enough heat to melt steel.
So if you have a flame at 750 degrees, you can hold that flame under a steel beam forever, and you'll never reach a high enough temperature to bend steel, let alone melt it.
First of all, let's go back to your basic premise that there was a pool of molten steel.
Like lava. Like lava from a volcano.
I know of absolutely nobody, and no eyewitness who said so, nobody who's produced it.
John Gross categorically denied their observations. He not only ignored evidence, he denied evidence.
The government acknowledged that Building 7's collapse was unprecedented. Engineers were also stunned. Yet somehow, news networks and many others knew it was going to happen. CNN reported the collapse an hour before it happened.
We are getting information now that one of the other buildings, Building 7, in the World Trade Center complex, is on fire and has either collapsed or is collapsing.
And a few blocks away,
Keep your eye on that building, it'll be coming down. This building is about to blow up. Move it back.
Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York.
the BBC even reported the collapse in detail live from New York over 20 minutes before it happened, with Building 7 still standing in the background. Immediately after Building 7's collapse, FDNY Lieutenant David Rastuccio had this to say.
We had heard reports that the building was unstable and that it eventually would either come down on its own or it would be taken down.
CBS veteran anchorman Dan Rather and others also had their first impressions, which were only broadcast on that tragic day.
For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
And I turned in time to see what looked like a skyscraper implosion. It looked like it had been done by a demolition crew. The whole thing just collapsing down on itself.
You don't need to be an engineer or an architect to see what happened to those buildings.
The most obvious hypothesis for anyone looking at the films is that the buildings came down because there was very carefully controlled demolition with high explosives that had been planted weeks, if not months, before.
9/11 claimed thousands of lives and touched millions more. It led us into 2 wars and was used to scale back our civil liberties and invade our privacy. But many people are beginning to question what we were told, and we are demanding answers. So how do we do it? We find our own voices and then we raise them together.
There's been hatred, there's been fear, but there's been no justice for the people who were killed on that day. We must have an inquiry to find out what really happened.
The official accounts of 9/11 are false.
This is so important that you've got to put your usual sources on hold for a while.
You take it slowly, just slowly digest it, slowly accept it.
When the most likely hypothesis in the case of Building 7 wasn't even mentioned.
They didn't talk about Building 7. Nobody mentioned it. And it wasn't hit by planes. So why did it go down?
What I want to persuade you to do is look into it, right? And make up your own mind.
Rethink 9/11.
Rethink 9/11!
Perth, Australia supports.
Rethink 9/11!
Join us and millions around the world who are now learning about the evidence and uniting to rethink 9/11.
Yeah. No, you're good. Yeah,
Sorry,
no.
guys, I was replugging in.
One of the most important things I think that points out is that we need to rethink 9/11. And another lesson we can learn from that is that there's a lot of things we need to rethink. And they tell us that we wear tinfoil hats all the time. A recent example.
Turns out Hillary is sick.
Yeah, there's that. Or it turns out that the DNC did collaborate against Bernie Sanders.
Oh yeah, there's that.
Oh, but Dave, you were crazy when you said it before.
Yeah, we're nuts.
You were crazy. You still got your tinfoil hat.
Yep.
You must.
Yep, I do. That's how it looked like tinfoil. Yeah. And my upside down flag, man. We got some. Because listen, what did this thing do? What did this crime accomplish? First of all, it parlayed itself into another crime that they used the same MO to lie us into, which was the war in Iraq, which created this entire chaos, which is what they were looking for. I mean, they had motive. They have motives. They told us what their motives were. The guys that took over the government in November of 2000 through a coup, basically wrote a plan that said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to build up our military. America's the project for a new American century. It says it all right there. And it says we need a new Pearl Harbor. So they either planned it, executed it, capitalized on it, or something in between. We know they knew something was coming. Richard Clark knew. Bush knew. Who could have thought? That's the thing. Condoleezza Rice, and they came out there and just said, who could have thought? And we all went, yeah, who could have thought? Turns out everyone in the intelligence industry thought about planes crashing into the Pentagon and the World Trade Center.
What was there was some kind of manual that actually had a picture of a plane crashing into the World Trade Centers that was released shortly before. And then it's funny you bring up Condoleezza Rice because she called, and I know you know his name, a mayor in California the night before and told him not to fly.
Yeah. I mean that's the thing. There's plenty of prima facie evidence that a crime was committed, and that there is no real, if you look at, if a jury is going to start looking at this evidence, if you don't have a body, which is basically what they did with the towers, was get rid of the body. Turns out they didn't get rid of all the bodies because they were still finding them on tops of buildings years later. Nice work, Giuliani. And so they destroyed the evidence, whitewashed the investigation, and marched us off into global unending war.
And they treated the survivors like shit.
Tristine Todd Whitman.
Especially the first responders.
Especially the first responders. And think about that. If these guys did just turn their back and not do anything and not scramble airplanes and, just waited for an attack to happen and just let them march in there. Giuliani knew, there's video of an interview of Giuliani knew about getting out of Building 7 because they told, why did you evacuate your Office of Emergency Management in the most fortified building, Building 7 again, like we saw, the most fortified building in Manhattan, where when shit like this goes down, that's where everybody is, where that one gentleman, I forget his name, but that he died actually in 2008 under suspicious circumstances because he wouldn't give up why he died, but he wouldn't give up his story that he was in the Office of Emergency Management. Nobody was there. And the coffee was still hot, and everybody was gone. And he and another guy were trying to get out. An explosion happened, and the firemen had to get him out of the 8th floor. So he's dead, that guy. So nobody's around to talk about that anymore. But we have a whole pile of reasons why we should not stop looking at this event, no matter how hurt we are and how in pain we are. The reason we need to do that is because of that. And Chuck Todd this morning having Tom Brokaw on, where were you? He made a very interesting Pearl Harbor reference. I'm like, oh Jesus, they won't give this shit up. Another Pearl Harbor reference, because that was the narrative on how after Pearl Harbor, hey, we weren't thinking about it after the war. It was done. Finished the war, You know, moved on, Nuremberg trial, whatever, timeline, but that was Japan, right? Okay, so war's over. But my point is, we weren't talking about Pearl Harbor 15 years later, right? Here we are, he's like, here we are 15 years later, and we're still being driven by this war. Obama, on August 30th, I'm re-upping the state of emergency that they did 15 years ago, which Congress is supposed to vote on. We're still in a state of emergency, guys, in case you don't know.
And the authorization for use of force.
Yeah.
Many years down the road, still using it.
Congress still, they are absent in their derelict in duty. They won't vote on Syria. We found that out. They won't vote on anything. They won't vote on this reauthorization. So, go ahead, Eric.
You mean to tell me that we got out of World War II quicker than we stopped this state of emergency after 9/11?
I think that's probably true, yeah, because Afghanistan was our longest war. So I don't know the exact date, but exact, but I could probably look that up really quick, or somebody could tell us on YouTube. But I think that's probably accurate. I mean, the thing is, it's still going on, right? Guess who's running Afghanistan now? The Taliban.
Yeah. Guess who was running Afghanistan then?
The Taliban.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
What's
changed? Same dudes. Mullah Omar's gone. And there's, the Al Qaeda, the base. Zbigniew Brzezinski, Mika's dad created this problem in Afghanistan, drawing the Soviet Union in. All right, maybe he brought down the Soviet Union, but guess what? Blowback. Okay, we got a little blowback happening. If you just want to, if you want to call it that, if you want to pigeonhole it into, we'll just call this blowback. But we keep doing it, the stuff that's calling blowback. We don't, they didn't plan for the aftermath. We didn't plan for the aftermath in Libya either. Apparently, we're not planning for the aftermath, and I guarantee we ain't planning for the aftermath in Syria.
Well, it's because regime change does not work. Well, number one, it's not our right to decide who the president of another country is or the ruler. When there's human rights violations, well, I'm saying we decided that we didn't like Gaddafi. So, human rights violations, that's an issue, but there's other ways to help fix those problems rather than installing our own government that ultimately benefits American corporations, and that's what we do.
Yeah.
We don't install governments because we suddenly feel sympathetic towards human rights violations. We install governments because we see an opportunity to make American corporations more money.
And we use our military and our private military, that sort of confluence of terms there, the transfer over to actually privatizing the military. They're all over that, and privatizing the national security state. So it's all part of it. We can see that. We see that at the pipeline. We see that at Dakota.
Yes.
We see these private security firms of all types. Some of the largest ones that are actually literally everywhere on the globe. Where were the real authorities on that day when those dogs were being used? Nowhere to be seen.
Well, and what's interesting, Dave, is one thing that I didn't even know about until a few days ago was the fact that there are so many of the Wall Street big banks that are invested in the pipeline. Not only do you have these big corporations that are involved in building it, but you also have companies like Wells Fargo, Bank of America, the list goes on and on and on and on, that actually are financially affected by what goes on at the pipeline, and they're heavily invested in it. So when we talk about the evil of these fossil fuel companies, yes, the fossil fuel companies are evil, and we know Wall Street is evil, but these guys work together. It's not just one-man show. They're all very diversified, and the big banks and Wall Street are very invested in fossil fuels as well. So those guys are fighting together to make sure this shit happens. And yes, I'm happy that Obama put a pause on construction. That is a victory, but this is a war. We're going to have to keep fighting. We're going to have to keep the pressure on.
Obama doesn't want a bad situation to get worse in his last part of his term.
Agreed.
He's just kicked this can down the road for Hillary to take care of if she makes it. talk about interesting times.
And you mean that in more than one way?
Yeah, I mean, but
I shouldn't laugh. I'm sorry.
I know. I mean, it's that video. She's not well. If she suffers from deep vein thrombosis, which apparently is why she's on blood thinners, traveling around in an airplane is not good for that. I know. I've learned about that. So it's kind of scary. This whole sixth season is scary. And, Donald Trump, one positive thing that sort of hit the top of my head about Donald Trump is that the Republicans and the Democrats are like, we can't stand this guy. So maybe he's not actually bought and paid for by the military industrial complex, but I don't know. It's starting to look like he's, he basically is the special interest now becoming the government is what that is. So, but yeah, I mean, just look at where we are now. Look at us 15 years later. Where are we? We almost all 7 of those last 2 are Syria and Iran of that list that Wesley Clark told us about when he walked into the Pentagon after 9/11, and they say, he said, oh, we're going to go take out Iraq, and then he talked to a general the next day. He said, oh no, it's worse than that. We got 7 we're going for. A whole list of 7 countries. Libya was one of them.
The NSA knows your underwear size, Dave.
Well, dude, if they don't have a file on me, they ain't doing their job. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I did smoke weed on Periscope the other day, so I don't know. Chella, are we committing a federal offense? I don't know, maybe. But me and Gary Johnson, we're like that with that. But we digress again on this very somber day. But we try to, a lot of times, my mother-in-law has Alzheimer's, and then sometimes if you don't laugh, you cry. And the absurdity of this story is, they tell us we're conspiracy theorists. We're actually looking at visual evidence that says this building obviously collapsed free fall, which NIST admits to finally in their reports showing the graph. They're like, oh yeah, it was free fall. Well, what does free fall mean? Well, let's find out what free fall means. Because I wish Adair was here, and I hope Adair's feeling okay. I wish he could have joined us tonight, because he is a physicist, and he has promised actually to, after a discussion we had, to actually maybe make it this project his project for the semester is to figure out the physics of this. So that would be great, and maybe he can hook up with the University of Alaska and get involved. But the architects and engineers for Truth and about 911, we're going to be speaking to Ted Walter later. They have a video about free fall and what it is. So I'm going to cue up this video here. It's ready to go. Well, that's the other one. But it's a very interesting concept and something that physicists know, certainly engineers know, and that it doesn't really fit into the narrative.
Essentially, in less than 7 seconds, Tower 7 came down upon itself.
It's just like taking your car keys out and just dropping them. That's how fast the building came down, for over 100 feet. And the only way you can get that is when there's zero resistance. And so what we're looking at is a building just coming straight down, falling right through itself with zero resistance. Buildings don't have zero resistance, which is why you feel comfortable walking into a building.
This building had 40,000 tons of structural steel in its structural system, and that is intended to keep it from going anywhere.
I'd heard people say, well, it came down at free fall or close to free fall and so forth, so I decided I'd measure it myself. I had a simple tool at the time called Physics Toolkit, which allowed me to take a video and put a dot on each frame to follow the motion of things. And I realized that it's actually coming down at free fall, pretty much dead on the acceleration of gravity. Well, NIST, in their final draft, was saying that the building came down with 40% longer than free fall time.
How can such a publicly visible, easily measurable quantity be set aside?
A free fall time would be an object that has no structural components below it. There was structural resistance that was provided in this particular case.
He was making our case for us. You can't have free fall when there's support. And in the final report, They modified it, and they actually admitted there was a period of free fall involved. But they never changed their model. Like, how do you all of a sudden allow for free fall when they just got done explaining how it couldn't have been in free fall?
NIST is telling us that the building below it ceased to exist for the first few seconds of the collapse of the building. Well, things in physics just don't cease to exist and cease to resist the forces that are on them. The building didn't disappear so the building can fall for 100 feet at free fall speed. That's impossible. That's a violation of the fundamental law of physics that says that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction.
If floors fall, they tend to fall and are braced by the floor directly beneath it. And there's some delay there.
Because of redundancy, because of all the other columns in the building that were not affected.
Even if a floor were to collapse, it still wouldn't be able to collapse all of the connections simultaneously at the rate that it did without secondary explosions.
Even they kind of have happy music. Just it's the crime of the century. I mean, other than slavery, destroying the Native Americans, every other illegal
century,
war.
not millennium. So
the century, not millennium, right? At least certainly of the last since JFK's assassination. But so here we have physics involved in the real story about free fall, and that the analogy that I tried to make to my family today, where they were also like, "Wow, really? Third building?" The analogy, like for instance, the not building 7. Let's take one of the Twin Towers. You have basically and somebody said this on the video. I think the guy with the beard at one point, another video. But basically, you have a Volkswagen on top of a semi-truck. And they're saying that gravity alone, even if you cut all those bars, gravity alone basically crushed that Volkswagen crushed the semi-truck, with gravity alone. And that's basically what they're asking us to believe in both the Twin Towers. Now in the in the Building 7, some of the testimonies that I've seen about the top penthouse dropping in first like that is just blatantly a what do you call it? A controlled demolition, because that means the center columns have been blown out, and the middle of the structure on the top bullet goes down first, and then everything collapses in top of itself, which is basically what it did at free fall speed. So comments on that video?
Well, I wish Brandon was here, because it makes me think about
our two PhDs. Our two PhDs didn't bother to show up to look at the evidence today. I want to say, I don't know if that's a conspiracy theory or not, but go ahead, Eric. Sorry.
But I'm trying not to laugh. Sorry. Hold on. So I've seen, and I understand physics a little bit, as much as some dweeb behind a computer can, and it just doesn't add up to me. None of it adds up to me. It doesn't make sense. I'm actually, I'm kind of a sports nut a little bit. Obviously, got Denver Broncos hat on. And so I've watched Mile High Stadium when it got blown up. I watched Kingdom when it got blown up. And that's what this looked like. That's exactly what this looked like. It looked very controlled, and it looked like it just so happened that a plane also hit it. When you're talking about falling at a free fall speed, well, that's pretty simple. That means that there was nothing standing in the way, which there certainly was. This was not an empty shell of a building. This was a building with floors that was specifically built to withstand instances such as this. And at minimum, something doesn't add up. I don't know what it is. We at least need to investigate. If you don't believe that this was done by the government, then you have to at least think about maybe the fact that we let somebody slip by that did perhaps plant bombs. I don't know what Dave just put up there, but
no, I'm just putting up. This is the website of architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, and these are the guys that have put together this video. And we're going to be talking to Ted Walter. It's Ted. I gotta get better at names. Chella, Chella says you gotta get better at names, Dave. I do, yeah. But this was all last minute, and he was gracious enough to come on. He's at they're at a conference in New York today. So he's going to join us after the conference. But yeah, I mean, Richard, that's physics, Richard.
Physics.
Yeah. Well, so from what I gather was the explanation about what actually caused it to collapse took several years before it came to light about what the official explanation even was. It was just, I don't remember what some of the early rumors were an explanation of what happened when it first collapsed. I guess people said that it was on fire. Trying to replay back in my mind.
They actually said people were actually saying that they heard bombs going off or they saw explosions.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. There's plenty of evidence, video and otherwise, of people hearing explosions, them knowing. The fire department, the first responders basically created a cordoned off area where people couldn't go because they knew it was going to come down. Obviously, media reported that it was going to come down. The most telling one that I've seen, and I don't have it up right now, but there's the BBC basically reported that it had fallen down half an hour before it fell down, and the building is in her live shot. So, they knew it was going to come down. Of course, there's the famous video of Larry Silverstein in the documentary, the leaseholder of the property saying, pull it. We just told the firemen, pull it. So, and then we watched the building collapse. So the fire evidence compared, I saw a very interesting image today, actually, in some of the video that I was watching of a shot of building number 5, of World Trade Center 5. There are several other buildings in this complex that were damaged beyond, really damaged. And the fires raging in building 5 on every floor, still standing, that building. So, we have evidence of definitely misinformation happening. And so we're hoping to hear from the architects and engineers for truth and see where they are in the current investigation. They'll be joining us at 6:30, and we're going to find out where they are and where they are with the Alaska. I'm going to play. This is a video of. Let me see if I can find it here. This is the evaluation. The University of Alaska, because of Architects and Engineers for Truth, which are at 2,628 architects and engineers are part of the organization. When they put out their first video there, it was at 1,500. It's up to 2,628 with over 21,000 signatures on their petition from their website, which I'll put it up again so you guys can see it. Here it is. These are the guys that created it. It's ae911truth.org. And it was created basically by Richard Gage and these other dudes who basically said, no, there's something wrong here. And so 21,000 signatures, and you see their mission is to research, compile, and disseminate scientific information about the destruction of all 3 World Trade Center skyscrapers. So they're looking at everything. And Building 7, of course, we are talking about it today. And this is what they've been able to raise enough money for. They are looking to raise more money to continue their investigation. And they have a store and you can buy DVDs and things like that. So I encourage you to support them if you can. But they did get enough money and are currently funding a 2-year study at the University of Alaska. And they have their own YouTube channel and website, and they have updates, and you can go down and you can look at their evidence. You can download their documents and what they're doing. And so this is, I think this is it. Yes, this is it. This is the little a preview of what they're doing up in Alaska. I hope this is it. Here we go. Nope, that's not it. Hang on. Stand by. Grassroots, people, grassroots.
I was going to play the video, but then I got high.
Talk amongst yourselves for a second here.
Ooh, was going to find that link from earlier,
there it
but
is.
then I got high.
Oh, good. Then I got high. All right, here we go. I got a link now. Ready? Here we go.
My name is Leroy Halsey. I'm a forensic engineer and a professor at the University of Alaska Fairbanks.
Steel is a very fire-resistant material.
When a structure fails, my job is to figure out why. Over the next year, with a team of PhD students, I will be rebuilding World Trade Center Building 7.
How does floor 13 respond with respect to 12?
Using the same drawings that were used to build it originally, we will reconstruct it virtually. Our goal is to figure out why it collapsed late in the afternoon on September 11, 2001, even though it was not hit by an airplane. The investigation conducted by the National Institute of Standards and Technology concluded
What we found was that uncontrolled building fires caused an extraordinary event. The collapse of World Trade Center 7 was primarily due to fires.
Our investigation will evaluate the probability that this was the cause of the collapse. We are making this study open and transparent. Whether you are a physicist, engineer, architect, fire expert, or specialist in another field, or just an ordinary citizen, we want your participation. We are making all of our data available online. Every aspect of our process regarding the modeling will be shared. And we will be giving regular updates from the lab as we continue our work. Join us in getting to the bottom of why World Trade Center 7 collapsed on September 11th, 2001.
Watch the explosions right there. You see them? Did you see those? Hang on. Go back. This is something I saw today that just fucking, sorry, pardon my French.
Actually, ironically, a
blew
person
my
in
mind.
the chat asked you to speak French. I'm not even
I think
kidding.
that was somebody else, wasn't it? They were asking, were they really asking me to speak French? No, I don't speak French.
Well, they said, speak in French,
It's like,
please.
remember, what was a fish called Wanda? The fish called Wanda? Speak French.
The only fish I know's name is Nemo. I don't know.
Okay, I just want to, that's so we, part of what I'm talking about here is there's some serious science going on that are actually investigating what happened, at least in with that tower. Oh no, that's not what I want. Okay, that's why. I just want to show you. I want to get a frame here in this video we just watched, and a piece of video. Here, is this it? Oh no. At the end, there's one shot of clear shot of World Trade Center 7 that shows what could be basically the video of the demolition. And here, I'm going to bring it back up. Here we go. It's at this end. It's this video. Now, this is before you see. I think that's starting to collapse up here. This is right at the beginning of the collapse. And I encourage anyone to find this video and actually see what they see, what I see. Now, what I'm looking at is over here. I'm looking over in this area, in the area right underneath the TIO evaluation, in the right side of the building. I don't know if my pointer's not working, but okay. So just watch. I'm going to leave the sound off. There. Did you see it? You see this? I can't point, but right next to where it says subscribe, there's a nice long line of explosions happening in the window. Here it is. Watch it again. Boom. Ugh.
Sorry, I have the.
I don't know.
I have it going on my other computer.
I know.
So I'm watching it delayed.
I don't know if you guys can see it, but that's some people are saying that is there's no fire going on there. Maybe that's just windows blowing out. I think that's one of the claims. But people, experts in this field, would say that those are explosions of charges that are blowing out supports.
Oh, what?
You see what I'm seeing?
See, I'm watching on YouTube delayed. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So that was something else that popped up, and I'm like, so these guys there's some real scientific research being done, because obviously you see that report, you see what the NIST spokesman says. Basically their story is an ordinary event caused an extraordinary event. An ordinary event of office fires, of office furniture, created an extraordinary event, which was the failure of one column that caused a massive failure of the entire structure. Fire in one part of the building, not even the whole building. Now, each one of those floors is the size of a football field. It's not a symmetrical building. That's one of the, if you watch the videos from the WTC 7 evaluation.org, some of their updates and their initial videos, it's not a symmetrical building. It's an oblong building if you look at it from overhead, and each side is not the same. So if it fell from fire, it should not fall straight down. And even, I mean, you have to try really hard, I would think, to get that to fall straight down. So we're hoping that that's going to come up with some real truth. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, watching the video again in slow motion, I see the top center obviously being the first thing that you see collapse. And then, so the story was, I was just reading a little bit, Popular Mechanics has a debunking 9/11 conspiracies thing that I was going through, because I wanted to kind of get into a
good work, Rich. Counting on you for that one. Nice.
And so, like, the fires were supposedly in like 2 separate levels near the bottom in the first 10 stories or so of the building, and now I wasn't sure how expansive they were, and as you mentioned, it was just office furniture and stuff like that. It doesn't seem to make sense to. The two problems I have reconciling is that how the building collapses. If that was intentional, how often are they capable of doing that intentionally? And then if it was unintentional, how often is it that happens unintentionally? And so I looked around. I couldn't find any example of that ever happening to a building before it in that way. I don't know. I'm sure other people have looked. I don't know if anybody else has ever come across anything, but
you are correct, sir.
Yeah.
You are correct, sir.
I saw some other buildings collapsing as a result of some fires, but they weren't complete collapses. They weren't nearly as clean.
No, there's actually been since 9/11 in Hong Kong. The Mandarin burned every floor for hours and hours, 12 hours, something like that, 16 hours, never came down. Not before or since have steel structured buildings collapsed because of fire. Firemen wouldn't go in them if they thought they could collapse. There's a protocol,
like such a non-catastrophic fire,
right? Like, completely non-catastrophic.
Fire is relatively common when it comes to tall buildings and offices. Like, I mean, they're reasonably rare events, but it's not that uncommon for a fire to get started and to expand across the entire floor.
Now the fires. You talk about the fires. Some of the evidence that they're presenting in the preliminary that I saw these examinations, these reevaluations, if you will. We're talking about basically there was something on fire for 7 hours. But they found that basically nothing was on fire in any particular area for longer than 20 minutes. So as fires do, normal fires, as this was, it finds new fuel and moves along, and then the fuel is done, and it goes out. There was no jet fuel in Building 7. There were literally, this is part of the evidence of explosion in World Trade Center 7, or rather 1 and 2, is that the ejection of beams from the side of the building into other buildings. There was massive damage to many buildings around. Building 7 was blocked by one of the buildings. If you look at the footprint, Building 7 was kind of blocked, part of it. Ironically, where they say the fire was on the 8th, between the 10th floor, you said, under the 10th floor, where the explosion is supposed to have happened on the 8th floor. Yeah. So that's, you're adding up the dots, as it were. But, James, unfortunately, obviously hasn't been able to join us from Japan. We're going to get him on the show again another time. If he jumps in later, I'm going to go right to him. But his new series on the suspects of 9/11, are, people will sometimes just write him off as a anarchist, conspiracy theorist. But he has some pretty good sources and does really good investigation on many levels. So, and this particular one is about Rudy Giuliani. And I encourage you to go watch all of them. But this one is about Rudy Giuliani, and it talks about Building 7 and some of the evidence and eyewitness evidence to what you're talking about. And I think just watching this, it's a little bit of a long one, and he's put out the whole video today of all of the suspects in one report. But you can watch them all individually, and they're all very fascinating. A couple of which I knew about and were in my sort of radar as to who's behind this, but a couple I didn't know about. So very interesting videos. That a lot of stuff has come out over the last few years, guys. It's amazing the amount of information since I've been out of this loop looking into this. And one of the interesting things that I wanted to talk to James about, and maybe another time, is the Paul Bremer connection to the investment firm that was a direct hit. That really burned my ass when I found out about that. And I didn't really know about it because I had basically stopped looking like you, Eric. So let me play this 9/11 Suspects. This is part of his series, James Corbett, The Corbett Report. I've been talking, so let me just bring it up. I think I've got it. Yes, I do. Here we go.
You're listening to The Corbett Report.
After stepping down as mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani tried to launch himself as a national political leader on the back of the single defining event of his career.
September 11th, September 11th. Terrorists or terrorism, September 11th. The flames of hell emanating from those buildings. September 11, fallen towers of the World Trade Center. Terrorists, September 11, 2001.
In the end, he failed miserably, with voters immediately seeing his ploy for what it was: base political pandering.
9/11 was bad.
I agree with that.
God, I can't believe how easy this is.
But what many do not realize is that Giuliani's case is not just that of another ghoulish politician parading on the corpses of those who died on his watch for his own political gain. On the day of 9/11, while the remains of the Twin Towers and World Trade Center 7 were still smoldering, one of Mayor Giuliani's first concerns was clearing away the evidence from the crime scene.
We were able to move 120 dump trucks out of the city last night, which will give you a sense of the work that was done overnight.
It's wild out here. They just keep coming. Look. It doesn't stop. There's more. I keep thinking it's at the end, and it's not.
Despite reassurances that the rapid removal of the evidence from Ground Zero was important for emergency access, this process went far beyond merely clearing a path for rescue workers. As Eric Lawyer, founder of Firefighters for 9/11 Truth, points out, the massive operation to haul away over 1.5 million tons of debris and to sell much of the steel to Chinese firm Baosteel at discount prices was not just an overzealous approach to clearing the area, but was itself a crime.
9/11 was the greatest loss of life and property damage in U.S. fire history. This should have been the most protected, preserved, over-tested, and thorough investigation of a crime scene in world history. Sadly, it was not. What was it? Well, we know from their own admission, the majority of the evidence was destroyed. Like Richard said, 22 years of experience. I've seen a lot of crime scenes. I've never seen anything like this in my life. I was out of the site. I saw trucks leaving faster than anywhere I've ever seen, but I accepted it at the time, and for years I accepted it because it was a recovery and rescue operation, and that's normal to have something like that going. Again, we'd never seen anything like it, but that was expected. What I didn't know for years, what was going on behind the scenes, was that evidence was being destroyed when it was shipped off. By their own admission, Tower 7 investigation, this investigation at Tower 7 had no physical evidence. How do you investigate a crime when you've destroyed all the evidence? It doesn't make sense. They also admit that they refused to test the explosives, or to test for explosives or residue of thermite. Now, this is what I'm going to go into here just real quickly, is there are national standards for an investigation. That's what all of us are asking for, an investigation that follows national standards and holds people accountable.
Needless to say, an investigation of the 9/11 crime scene following the national investigation standards has never been conducted and never will be, as Giuliani oversaw the illegal destruction of the evidence itself. To add insult to this injury, in 2003, New York City medical examiner Charles Hirsch revealed that in the mad scramble to get rid of the crime scene evidence, human remains from the World Trade Center had been left at the Fresh Kills landfill, where the debris was sorted and the steel was sold. In 2007, Eric Beck, a senior supervisor of the recycling facility that sifted the debris, admitted that some of those human remains ended up in a mixture that was used to pave roads and fill potholes in New York City. But as grotesque as such revelations are, they are not the most shocking part of Giuliani's 9/11 story. In the late 1990s, the mayor oversaw the creation of a state-of-the-art $13 million emergency command center to coordinate the city's disaster recovery and response efforts. Located on the 23rd floor of World Trade Center Building 7, just across Vesey Street from the Twin Towers, the center, dubbed by local press at the time as Giuliani's bunker, included reinforced, bulletproof, and bomb-resistant walls, its own air supply and water tank, beds, showers to accommodate 30 people, and 3 backup generators. It could be used to monitor all of New York's emergency communications frequencies and was staffed 24 hours a day. And yet, remarkably, on the morning of 9/11, neither Mayor Giuliani nor any other city personnel or police or fire department officials were in the bunker after the Twin Tower strikes.
As I told you guys before, it's very funny. I was on my way to work, and traffic was excellent. I received a call that a small Cessna had hit the World Trade Center, and I was asked to go and man the Office of Emergency Management. Upon arriving into the OEM EOC, we noticed that everybody was gone. I saw coffee that was on the desk. Still, the smoke was still coming off the coffee. I saw half-eaten sandwiches.
So why wasn't the mayor and the city's emergency personnel in the location that had been purpose-built for just such an event? According to Giuliani, they had been told to evacuate because they had been given a warning that the Twin Towers were going to collapse. A warning that was evidently not passed on to any of the emergency personnel that were still working in the buildings.
I went down to the scene and we set up headquarters at 75 Barclay Street, which was right there with the police commissioner, the fire commissioner, the head of emergency management. And we were operating out of there when we were told that the World Trade Center was going to collapse. And it did collapse before we could actually get out of the building. So we were trapped in the building for 10, 15 minutes and finally found an exit and got out, walked north, and took a lot of people with us.
Giuliani, in his own words, has admitted that he was warned that the World Trade Center was going to collapse. This despite the fact that there was no possible way for this to be predicted in the first hour of the unfolding disaster. Even more incredibly, despite being given this warning, no effort was made to pass it on to the police, firefighters, and other responders who were still working in and around the buildings. When precisely was this warning given, and by whom? Why, despite acting on this warning himself, did Giuliani make no effort to pass the warning on to others? Predictably, when confronted with these questions by activists during his 2008 presidential campaign, Giuliani merely smiled and denied that he had ever received such a warning.
You reported to Peter Jennings that on 9/11 that the World Trade, the towers were going to collapse, and excuse me, no steel structure in history has ever collapsed due to a fire. How come the people in the buildings weren't notified, and who else knew about this, and how do you sleep at night?
Ma'am, I didn't know that the towers were going to collapse.
You reported to Peter Jennings. No.
You said on Peter Jennings on ABC
And
video,
also-
you indeed said that the towers, you were notified the towers were going to collapse while you were in some, not sure exactly where you were prior to, but you said on ABC video with Peter Jennings in an interview that you were aware that towers were going to collapse in advance. We'd like to know who told you the towers were going to collapse in advance, sir, and also we'd like to know who else you told.
Well, the fact is that I didn't realize the towers would collapse. I never realized that.
So where was the mayor on 9/11? On Pier 92, which was already set up as a functional command center due to a full-scale emergency drill by FEMA that, by a remarkable coincidence, had been scheduled for the following day.
And we selected Pier 92 as our command center. And the reason Pier 92 was selected as the command center was because on the next day, on September 12th, Pier 92 was going to have a drill. It had hundreds of people here, from FEMA, from the federal government, from the state emergency management office, and they were getting ready for a drill for biochemical attack. So that was going to be the place they were going to have the drill. The equipment was already there. So we were able to establish a command center there within 3 days that was 2.5 to 3 times bigger than the command center that we had lost at 7 World Trade Center. And it was from there that the rest of the search and rescue effort was completed.
Mayor Giuliani oversaw the illegal destruction of the 9/11 crime scene and is criminally liable for the deaths of hundreds of emergency workers for not passing on prior warnings about the collapses of the Twin Towers. It is no wonder, then, that the fire department of New York so passionately detests Giuliani for his actions in disgracing their fallen brothers and covering up the 9/11 crime.
Rudy Giuliani has used the horrible events of September 11, 2001, to create a carefully crafted persona. But the fact is, what Rudy portrays is not a full picture of the decisions made that led, in our view, to the unnecessary deaths of our FDNY members and the attempt to stop the dignified recovery of those lost. The urban legend of America's mayor needs to be balanced by the truth.
So what is the reward for Giuliani's criminal actions on 9/11? An offer to become the head of the Department of Homeland Security in the event of a Trump presidency, of course. This is the state of American politics, and this is precisely why a true investigation of what happened on 9/11 never has and never will be conducted by the U.S. government itself.
I can tell you that there was no credible intelligence.
I know the guy that went into his broker in San Diego and said, cash me out, it's going down tomorrow.
That's a little disturbing. That from the Corbett Report. The website is up there. CorbettReport.com, I think it is. Yes, CorbettReport.com, 2 T's. And that's just one of about 5. Looks at alternative, and it's not even, okay, the crime, let's put aside for a second the, I'm going to get my camera up here. Sorry, guys. Let's put aside for a second the idea that there was pre-knowledge of the event itself. Let's talk about the fact that he admitted on national TV that he was told that the building was going to come down, and that they evacuated that building 7 because of that. So, as James says, that's he didn't warn the firefighters. He didn't warn anybody if he knew that they were, if he indeed knew that they were coming down, which he admitted to on live TV. So, a lot of this stuff has disappeared. A lot of these reports on CNN and Fox have disappeared from archives. The only reason, I was talking to my cousin today, he's like, how do you know all this stuff? It's like, look, you can James backs up all of everything. James backs up everything with documents and mainstream news sources, and unfortunately, some of the only remaining parts of those are on Prison Planet website, but they're from AP sources that are gone now, So, which I think, Eric and I were talking about this the other day. I firmly believe that Alex Jones is a CIA plant. And that he's actually CIA, and because disinformation is 95% true, and and he's basically tells everybody what's going on. Loose change is like, here's what happened, and then he says it was because of lizard people from another planet, and that's where he loses everybody. So, and that's what the CIA going, no, we'll get him.
Lost me.
We'll get him.
That's why I stopped being a truther.
That and attacking TYT, right? What's that? Hillary's health.
Same thing with Hillary's health. It's like, people were like, she needs help getting up places. She doesn't seem to be able to stand. She's always got a stool.
So why did she do that before she got in her damn van?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That doesn't help. Have you read any tweets from the Donald? I haven't. I don't know. I'm sure he's tweeting the hell out of that. But listen, that the end of that video is very plain. Guess who's going to be his Homeland Security guy? That's pretty damn scary. Yeah, that's pretty damn scary. The guy that knows what the fuck happened. He knows what the fuck happened. And I mean, and L. Paul Bremer, I wanted to talk to James about that, and maybe we can talk about that on another show if I can get him on. But, if you know who this guy, if you know who this guy is, he's the guy that ran Iraq into the ground, basically, and created ISIS in Iraq, or fomented them, or whatever you want to call it, because he fired the army and blah, 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 but basically destroyed Iraq. And then you find out later that just so happens it's his investment company that was the direct hit, was the target. And there was whistleblowers in that damn office. And guess who were at a meeting that morning? The whistleblowers, among others. And he was conveniently not at the meeting. And there were other people in that target zone that were on conference calls, Larry Silverstein didn't make his morning meeting. I mean, all of this stuff is documented in the news and in past, in documentaries that have been put together, and the only reason we know about this stuff is people are digging and looking, and they're finding, the Wayback Machine, and they're looking at archives, and it's true. People on the internet have a lot of time on their hands, and people are putting a lot of work in to finding out information. I mean, some of the research on the Pentagon is just, it's remarkable what they found. It's what some of this research is finding and a lot of it is circumstantial. A lot of it is, you could, I can explain that away, but a lot of it really isn't. And we need real investigations about the whole damn thing, and we're not getting it. So basically, so there you go, Richard. This is basically an indestructible structure, and it was brought down by office fires, perfectly symmetrically.
It's almost like if Richard was able to take down Brandon. It's that impossible.
It's that impossible. It's that Brandon is going to fall to the ground by gravity alone after one punch. Because his head is not as heavy as the bottom of his body. It's just not going to work. In any case, so we jest.
By the way, when I know we're digressing far too much, or at least I am, but
you got to break it up a little bit.
When we're talking about Hillary, I just picture her going, "Just got to get to the van. Just got to get to the van.
Get to the van. Get
to the van.
Get to the van." He got the arm. I was carrying my mother-in-law to the car, just like that, before we went on the air, guys. That's why I said, "Hey, hang on a second." And my wife brings over her mom, a few days a week, in her wheelchair, and we got to get her into the car. So I was right before going on air. So yeah, man, I know that hold under the arm move. Been there, done that. And Chel's like, "Oh, she's fainting." I'm like, yeah, she's fainting, all right. And, the cough, it just plays right into it. Man, I don't know. God, it's...
and it's pneumonia, and like... Well, and then people are like, well, then why were you posing with a child? That's... Oh, well, she's on antibiotics, so, like, she's not contagious. Like, well, you just found it 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Or diagnosed it anyway.
I've had pneumonia. It ain't fun. And if she's got thrombosis and pneumonia and old people are not a good combination.
No.
And I don't want to. And I just because I know that. I mean, I see like my mother-in-law's in a locked facility with 85 people and with dementia. And, pneumonia is not a happy thing. They're like, you sure you don't want a flu shot? You sure you don't want a shot for the flu? No flu shot. How about pneumonia? Okay, pneumonia we'll take. But, it's a scary thing. Anyway, we digress again. But here's the thing. Here's Giuliani's going to be his, Homeland Security czar, which is just, you watch that video and you go, really? So we're waiting for Ted to join us.
Just like Giuliani said that Obama is the only person that's allowed terrorist attacks to happen. Yeah, he said that too. Don't forget that.
Yeah.
All right, let me get this set up here, guys. Our guest looks like our guest is arriving. We're gonna bring him in. Ted is here. Ted Walter from Architects and Engineers. Looks like he's trying. Oh no, is he trying? Is that? Yeah, that's Ted. He's trying to sign in. Yeah. I don't have his camera yet. Do you see his camera? Oh, there he is. Oh, I can't. I'm having some trouble with Facebook. It won't let me see people. All right, let me. Or not Facebook. Firefox. Hi, Ted. Can you hear me? Oh, I think he's muted. Is he muted?
He's on mute.
Yeah.
Sorry. Hi. Yeah.
Oh, hey, there you are.
Hey there.
Let me just adjust here, Ted. I gotta quickly set you up. I'm gonna bring your camera up here. A little more headroom there, Ted. Can you give me a little more headroom? That'd be awesome. Tilt up. That's perfect. Looking good, my friend. Hey, sir. I thank you for joining us at the very last minute. Welcome to Project Sanity. I'm with my cohorts here on this show. My name is Dave. I'm with Eric Miller and Richard Green. We're contributors and hosts of this grassroots citizen journalist network on the YouTube. And I really appreciate you coming on tonight. It took a little convincing to get these guys to do this show. Not too much. But I definitely was able to, I'm going to try to bring you up here and maybe get Richard up because I can see Richard on my Facebook. So here we go. We're bringing everybody in. I still can't get that Facebook working. All right, I'll bring you in. Richard, I'll get you in here. Mr. Walter, welcome. You are a spokesperson for Architects and Engineers for 911 Truth.
Yes.
And I've just been I must apologize. I literally have just been watching your videos within the last couple of weeks because I dropped the ball on this movement. And a couple of things got me back into it. And one of which, of course, the smoking gun for me has always been Building 7. And the fact that there's a new investigation happening really sparked my interest. And I'd like you to talk about that. And where were you today? And just tell us about what's going on and where we are with that investigation with the University of Alaska.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys very much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. As you said, I work for Architects and Engineers for 911 Truth. It's a pretty small nonprofit organization, but we represent over 2,600 architects and engineers who have all signed our petition, which calls upon the U.S. Congress to open a new investigation into the destruction of the World Trade Center Twin Towers, as well as Building 7, which is a 47-story building in the World Trade Center complex that collapsed later in the day on 9/11. So today I was at a conference that we are co-sponsoring along with other groups and organizations. And it was at Cooper Union in the Village in New York City. It was a very productive conference, and I can tell you a little bit more about that a little bit later. The study that you're speaking to is we call it World Trade Center 7 Evaluation, WTC 7 Evaluation. The website is WTC7evaluation.org. And it's basically a study that's being conducted by a professor at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. His name is Dr. Leroy Halsey. He's the chair of the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department at the university. And we connected with him about a year and a half ago to undertake basically a computer simulation, a finite element modeling analysis of Building 7 to try to really in a way, decisively, definitively answer the question of whether fires could have brought down this 47-story steel frame structure. And there was a colleague of ours, a friend in Alaska, who had been reaching out to a lot of people actually to see who might be interested in performing this kind of study. Who obviously somebody who has the expertise and the resources to do it. And he found Dr. Halsey, and Dr. Halsey was interested. He's pretty late in his career. I think we all know that 9/11 and asking questions about what really happened on 9/11 it's a controversial subject. But Dr. Halsey felt like he was in a position where he had nothing to lose, and he was really interested to take this on. And really the idea is that you can basically take the drawings from the building that were used to build the building and recreate it digitally. And if you do it right, you can simulate the behavior of the building and how the building would respond to various inputs. In this case, we're primarily focused on fire. Is there any way that fire could cause the steel members of this building to react and move in such a way that that a structural failure would occur that would then bring down the entire building? And that's the story that we've been given by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is an agency of the Department of Commerce, which started its investigation into the collapse of all three buildings in 2002. And they finished their investigation to the towers in 2005. And then finally in 2008, 6 years later, they came out with their report on Building 7. And essentially they allege what, in the view of many engineers and architects that we represent, is a fantastical, implausible scenario of how fires could have, caused this structure to suddenly come down into its footprint. And the goal of this study, really, a lot of people will ask the question, why are you doing this study if there's already all this evidence that Building 7 was brought down by a controlled demolition? It looks obviously like a controlled demolition. And I can speak more to that, all the features of Building 7's collapse if your viewers are not familiar with it. But the answer is, more science and more research is always good. And right now, the only computer modeling that's been done of Building 7 is by NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, as well as a few engineering firms that work for different parties in litigation related to Larry Silverstein and Con Edison. But the only publicly available modeling or story about what happened to Building 7 based on modeling is from NIST. And somebody else needs to do it and see if NIST do their own modeling and see if NIST did it right, if NIST's model makes sense. And really, this is how we gain a greater foothold within the engineering community, the academic engineering community, and engineering community at large, is by doing this type of study. Without this, no matter how strong the evidence is, no matter how many architects and engineers we have, we're just not going to gain a whole lot of traction without a study like this being performed by, a professor, like one at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And so that's what we've done, and it's been quite an investment financially on the part of our organization. But we've chosen to sponsor this research by Dr. Halsey. And he actually announced today yesterday at this conference, he traveled to New York to present his preliminary findings, and based on about a year of analysis that they've been doing. And his conclusion, pretty simply, but definitively, he can say at this point that fire could not have and did not bring down this building. So that's where we're at. There's a lot more work that has to be done to shore up that finding, and as well, his focus, his approach is to go, well, let's look at everything else that could possibly have somehow affected this building. Somehow the debris falling on the ground and falling on the building, weakening it in some way. But so this study should be done by next April. At which point, we'll have a final report from him, and then he will go about trying to publish his findings in academic journals. And we are, really counting on this to make a difference and help this argument gain traction within the engineering community. And a lot of our time by next year will be devoted to doing everything that we can to ensure that it does.
So you mentioned that he basically, Dr. Hulsey has made the conclusion that this did not come down by fire. And now he's basically, the rest of the study is going to be to try to find out what did bring down the building. Is that right?
Yeah. So Halsey came into this project saying, I will definitely be able to tell you what did not bring down this building. So the goal has been to primarily look at whether fire could have somehow brought down this building. I think once he has exhausted all sort of natural scenarios, and subjected the building to those natural scenarios in the computer model, I think that leaves us with only one rather obvious explanation. I'll be honest, it remains to be seen how explicitly Dr. Halsey wants to address that. But the idea is to eliminate, at a minimum, all natural scenarios.
And Mike, myself, this is where we are on Building 7, which this is, encouraging as far as what, the truth movement, if you will, looking for some real evidence as opposed to the NIST report and the complete ignoring of it in the 911 Commission. We've been watching some of the videos from Dr. Halsey when it first started. I've been looking at some of their reports, and we've been talking about Building 7 pretty much the first part of the show and the anomalies. So it's good news that there is actually an investigation progressing. What about? I know you're looking into both towers. Where are you with the Twin Towers? And because the more and more I look at it, we got to be looking at that too. So are you any further in maybe, I guess it really is going to come down to raising some money to funding a report of that size?
Yeah, money is certainly a factor. I think it's definitely on the horizon to also model the towers. It's not something that we definitely decided to do or committed to. But it's something that ideally we would like to do. We kind of wanted to take one step at a time and see how it goes with Building 7, and see what kind of work Dr. Halsey would be able to do. But I think he is interested in going forward with modeling the towers as well. Now we may see that, like Building 7, his analysis of Building 7, and what he also spoke about at the conference was how utterly and thoroughly, I guess you would say, inept NIST's modeling was. And really, not only, a lot of people will take the approach that NIST's report and their analysis was fraudulent. It was deliberately trying to cover up what happened and come to a different conclusion that was totally unsupported by any evidence. But even from just a basic modeling methodology perspective, they did many things that were terribly wrong that Dr. Halsey reported on. And we think that with that kind of a really damning assessment coming out of this study, that alone could be a big trigger for engineers in general and hopefully the broader public to really look at this again seriously, and then make the rather logical jump to saying, okay, well, if Building 7 was a controlled demolition, what does that mean about the Twin Towers? Now there is already so much incredibly strong evidence in the public sphere regarding the collapse of the Twin Towers. You really just start by looking at the videos of the towers coming down with fresh eyes, and you will realize that it is not a building collapsing. It is a building that is explosively disintegrating. The behavior of the building is like an umbrella of pulverized, everything in the building being instantaneously pulverized and ejected, and the steel completely shattered, the frame completely shattered and ejected hundreds of feet in all directions. You don't see the tops of the buildings actually coming down and hitting each successive floor. The tops of the buildings disappear within a couple seconds. They themselves are totally obliterated before the destruction really commences throughout the rest of the building, at least mostly. So, and there's so much other evidence as well, and your viewers may be familiar or not familiar with it. I don't know. I probably don't have the time to go into all of it now.
Oh, you got all the time you want.
All right. Well, yeah. So there's one of the most powerful presentations that was given today was by Professor Graham McQueen from. He's a retired professor from McMaster University in Ontario, Canada, and he's been like the foremost researcher into like looking at and analyzing objectively the eyewitness accounts, primarily contained in the FDNY oral histories. In the first year after 9/11, the fire department conducted all these interviews with 503 firefighters and paramedics and EMTs, and out of those 503. Dr. McQueen identified 118 of them. 118 of those eyewitness accounts of those oral histories contained eyewitness accounts of explosions occurring in the towers. And he laid out some pretty like objective criteria for establishing what he considered to be an explosion witness, such that they use the words like, I thought bombs were going off, or using the word explosion, using the word blasted out. And other similar.
Well, and this stuff, these weren't even addressed in the 9/11 Commission at all. They never mentioned the word an explosion, except I think once I heard in another context. So yes. None of these people have ever been heard.
Yes, that's correct. The 9/11 Graham, Professor McQueen actually said, okay, what did the 9/11 Commission tell us about these explosions or any of these eyewitness accounts of explosions? There's like one half sentence, and it's like very. It was trying to attribute the explosion or the perception of explosion to something else, something like the floor is hitting or what have you. So ignored by the 9/11 Commission and ignored by the agency that was tasked with investigating the collapses by NIST. There was a request for correction filed to their final report in 2007 by an architect, some engineers, and a couple of 9/11 family members addressing all these failures in NIST investigation. And one of them was their failure to look at any or acknowledge any of the eyewitness accounts of explosions. NIST came back and said, like, overall, on the balance of things, all the eyewitness testimony that we read did not lead to suggest the idea that these towers were brought down by demolition. If you go and read them, and we have this actually, trying to think where the most accessible place would be, but we just put out a document that just has the 118 excerpts from the 118 oral histories, like all just together in one place, because we actually, among the things that we do besides like publishing papers and doing research and is we do some of the more like sensational, like in your face type of stuff too, because we basically have to use every avenue at our disposal to raise awareness. So we have a billboard up outside the New York Times, which has a very like graphic picture of the South Tower coming down, and it says collapse or explosion, and it references the eyewitness accounts, which, because the New York Times actually sued the city of New York to obtain these oral histories, and the oral histories they won that suit, and the oral histories were released in 2005, and these oral histories are sitting on the website of the New York Times, and yet the New York Times has never really delved into what is the evidence contained in these oral histories, and that was even said by David Sanger, the chief correspondent, the Washington chief correspondent of the New York Times, that when somebody called him on C-SPAN and asked him about Building 7, and he said we haven't seen any evidence so far to suggest that anything other than the planes brought down these buildings, but the evidence is sitting on their website.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing when you go back over. Even watching the replay, as they do every year on MSNBC or wherever, what they saw. I mean, everything that folks are talking about that has become, that is evidence of what happened is in there. You hear them, saying exactly like, talking about the building falling down, or it's just there. It's all right there. I'm trying to think of the exact example that I saw today, but when you go back, as so many people have done. And whether it's, you label them conspiracy theorists, which is a convenient term created by the CIA anyway, and a truther, this whole demonstrative use of the word truther, we're crazy because we want the truth, and so they bundle everybody in there. But just looking at the prima facie evidence, one of the things we're talking about today, and that we're not getting the whole story. the physics of all the buildings are just wrong from every angle and from every conceptual. If you're a professional like you guys are, when you look at that, you know, one of the best examples or metaphors that I heard was you can't crush a semi with a Volkswagen with just gravity. It's not going to happen. I don't care how, if you severed the whole thing, it's, you know, it's going to fall over. It's going to fall off. It's not going to crush the whole thing at near free fall speed all the way down. The ejections, you know, those beams ended up in buildings. I saw a picture today of building 5 fully engulfed, floor to top, fully engulfed, the entire building. Never came down, but a half a dozen office, you know, fires on the 8th or 10th floor, and one beam creates a completely symmetrical attack. And then we have Barry Jennings' testimony that he said exactly what was going on. And that Giuliani, you know, we know he said get out of the building to people, and Barry missed it, obviously, but he knew towers were coming down. He admitted to it. Eric, I know you're dying to get in here. Do you have a question, sir? Eric Miller, Ted, one of my cohorts here, and a longtime follower of these investigations. Go ahead, friend.
So actually, my question is, I mean, it's obviously on topic, but something that's always made me curious with organizations like the one you work with is if you receive any kind of government pushback or pushback from even corporations that may not want you to be furthering these investigations. And because obviously there's answers that you're going to come up with that they're not going to like. Just pushback in general. I'm curious about what kind of pushback you've received, if any.
Sure. Well, you know, there's a lot of, I mean, there's pushback from all sorts of different angles. There's the debunker community, which I really don't know who these people are that sit on the internet. It's got to be ultimately a pretty small group of people that's like sitting there and trying to debunk everything we say. But who knows who those people are. By and large, the attitude of like NIST is to ignore us, right? They put out some FAQs on their website like years ago, and they've sat up there basically addressing all the evidence that they failed to address in their reports, but not conducting any sort of serious analysis, just coming up with like really basic and pretty ludicrous explanations to explain away a lot of this evidence. You get, you know, we do a lot of outreach, direct outreach to like architects and engineers particularly. I mean, obviously our videos are widely watched, you know, millions of views of our videos, and that's been a major source of education throughout the world. But we also focus a lot in particular on, you know, educating more architects and engineers, trying to erode support for the official story within the engineering and the architecture community. And we get, you know, it's not easy. You know, we go to the national, the National Convention of the American Institute of Architects, and, you know, we get a lot of people that are very unhappy about us being there. We started submitting resolutions asking their members to vote to call upon the Institute to officially support a new investigation into the collapse of Building 7. And we've done that 2 years now, and we've made some progress. We got 4% of the vote last year, which is kind of like mind-boggling. You know, I mean, because I think you have to realize that at that point where we're with educating members of the AIA, you know, maybe a third of the people in that room, maybe half, actually do think or suspect that Building 7 was a controlled demolition. But getting those folks to vote in favor of it, that's a different matter. Yet it's a battle that we have chosen. We've picked that battle because it's such a good vehicle for educating the architecture community. But they try to tear us to shreds in the business meeting where this resolution is voted on. And so we went back this last year, did it again, had a longer resolution that actually contained all the evidence in it, and we got 11% of the vote, which is, you know, basically a threefold increase, which we felt like was a real increase, a serious change in what, you know, some of the members were thinking and feeling about this. And the stance of the AIA, of their board, changed significantly. Their willingness to proudly endorse the official story just diminished. Their official position on our resolution was very, very weak and tepid in terms of what they were willing to say. They said, you know, that this has been, they've come to reasonable conclusions, or that this has been investigated by competent authorities and with a reasonable conclusion. But whereas last year they were really strongly endorsing it. So We get pushback from institutions like the AIA, the American Society of Civil Engineers. We tried to do a mailing to 35,000 members of the American Society of Civil Engineers this September, and they denied us use of their mailing list. We worked with a third-party company. We wanted to put out, some really important research that has been done to all the members of the most relevant groups of members of the ASCE, and they denied use of their list. Not really that surprising. That's fine. We went and got a different list from, using the same third-party vendor. We did our mailing to 35,000 civil and structural engineers throughout the country. And that went out within the last week. So we'll see what kind of response there is for that. And then, as far as our internally, those are just the people that, the powers that be within these communities. Whoever was behind 9/11 obviously does not want us to succeed. And, we face little impediments here and there that look suspicious. Our website gets hacked a fair amount. People try, but we deal with it quickly and we move on. So,
what's your evaluation on the United States withholding the 29 pages of the 9/11 report that included Saudi Arabia? A lot of talk about Saudi Arabia and other information. How, from your viewpoint and what you're working on, does that affect any of that, or just what are your thoughts in general?
Sure. So as an organization, we don't take a position on like the 28 pages or, whether it's a good idea it was a good idea to advocate for the release of the 28 pages. It's a topic that is the 9/11 truth community. It divides opinion to some extent. Because some people believe, and I'm not speaking for architects and engineers for 9/11 truth when I say this, but some people suspect that this is a limited hangout, that it, and that there's even, some kind of an operation at foot to be able to blame Saudi Arabia solely for 9/11, and if the only result of the 28 pages coming out and then the passage of JASTA last week, and now it's to President Obama to either sign or veto the JASTA legislation, which allows family members of 9/11 victims to sue.
I wanted you to explain that a little bit. What is JASTA, and why is Obama even thinking about not signing it, or is that the case?
Yeah. So JASTA, as far as I understand it, and it's not something I've spent a huge amount of time looking at, but is basically legislation that will allow the families of victims of terrorism to sue foreign governments that may have been involved in those acts of terrorism. And so basically, it doesn't apply solely to 9/11 in Saudi Arabia, but that's primarily how it would be used.
Yeah, TPP will let the countries sue the companies that are for other countries for screwing up with their profit, but we can't sue other countries for killing our people. And that's coming to when is that coming due?
Well, so it passed the Senate recently, and then it passed in the House, I think, on Friday. And so now it's on Obama's desk. And he threatened at some point to veto it. And I was kind of doubtful actually that it would pass through the legislature. And
surprising.
So it is surprising, and I'm not going to speculate on the reasons. It's really outside of my focus and my expertise to speculate on the reasons why he's going to veto it, why he would veto it. But I think on the one hand, there could be some good outcomes from this, and then there could be some not so good outcomes from it, and from this focus on Saudi Arabia. Perhaps if there is litigation against Saudi Arabia, it would result in a discovery process that would just unearth all of this evidence that would implicate, the Saudis that were apparently involved in 9/11, as well as many other people, and perhaps closer to home if that's where the truth lies.
That's exactly what I was hoping you would get to with your answer, actually.
So Richard Green, go ahead. I'm sorry, Ted.
No, take it away.
Richard Green, co-host. Go ahead. Do you have a question? Oh, unmute yourself.
There we are. You talked a little bit, thank you again for joining us. You talked a little bit about some of the pushback that you got. I'm curious, what are some of the more, what you said that, 11% voted for the resolution, but that the percentage of people that kind of agree with the sentiment may be much larger. Of the people that don't agree, what's one of the more sound arguments that comes out of like legitimate objections that you get from them? If just to play devil's advocate a bit.
Yeah, well, let's at least start with Building 7 because that's what the resolution is about with the AIA. They will tend to argue that, well, the building was severely damaged by debris from the North Tower as well. Well, that's all fine and good. We actually don't know for sure exactly how much damage was sustained. There's not a lot of good photography of the south face of the building, but the NIST report says that the damage to the building actually had nothing to do with its collapse whatsoever. It did ignite the fires, but if you had exactly the same fires occurring in the building without any debris damage, it still would have come down due to those fires. So it is a solely fire-induced collapse according to NIST. So if somebody puts forward the argument, well, there's all this damage, well, but that's just not the official story. So now you're making up your own story. Maybe that's true, but you got to prove it. Then they kind of talk about how long the fires lasted in the building. Yes, if you leave fires, to just travel through a building for 6 hours, which usually doesn't happen. Usually firefighters will be sent up to fight that fire. And that in itself is a strange occurrence that the FDNY decided not to fight the fires in that building. And you get into that. There's a whole other thing to discuss.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about that for a second.
Okay. Well,
why there was yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Finish up.
To quickly wrap up that point, the fires were not in any particular area in Building 7 for more than like 45 minutes. So when we talk about fires just going on forever and these raging fires, there were not raging fires. They were, I'm not going to say relatively small, but they were not exceptional fires.
Right.
They were smaller than many large high-rise fires that we've had, dozens of buildings in the last 50, 100 years. So.
Before or since?
So that's the main pushback that we get from those people. They want to believe that these fires were just crazy. They want to believe that we also say, buildings, it wasn't designed properly. There's no evidence whatsoever that it wasn't designed properly. So people start to like come up with these explanations.
Well, it was actually reinforced, wasn't it? At some point when they took it over, they needed to actually add more strength to it, because it was built on a different building, another building foundation. And
it was built on top of a Con Ed substation. So it had a little bit of unusual. Many buildings have relatively unusual designs and construction, but it was built on top of Con Ed substation. I can't speak specifically to whether they reinforced it at some point. I don't know about that.
Right. Was there a diesel fire? Was there a diesel tank explosion? As far as you know,
there was not, and that is now a part of the official story. The diesel fuel fires had nothing to do with it, and yet there was somebody who got up at last year's AIA business meeting and said, "We already know what happened. The diesel fuel fires brought it down." And he's speaking in front of hundreds of architects. Like, he should actually know what the official story is if he supports it.
Right.
Wow.
Well, 42% of the population didn't even know there was a third building that came down in a recent poll. So
that seems to be at the core of a lot of the distrust of the alternative theories, or the suggestion that it wasn't fire that brought it down, is just misinformation or ignorance or lack of information or complete information regarding what we know and what the official story was and is now. And so I find that very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we have a problem when, like, for example, you're curious to know what is going on in the profession. Last year we went to the Structural Engineering Summit, like last October, and there was about 400 structural engineers that go there. We spoke to about 100 of them. 25 of them signed our petition, but about half of them didn't know that a third building collapsed on 9/11. A skyscraper, a 47-story skyscraper, and these are structural engineers. So it's pretty mind-boggling. Like, that would be, I mean, we all know that if that happened on any other day, it would be like insane. It would, it would be like all over the news. It would be studied. It would be the most studied structural failure in history.
That's like an NFL player not knowing who won the Super Bowl or something. Like, that's part of their job, is they should know stuff that happens to buildings.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very good metaphor.
So what's next, Ted?
Wow, that's a good question. I wrestle with that question every day. That's kind of my job for architects and engineers.
Because nobody wants to talk about this anymore, as far as I can tell. Certainly not the general public. And once we, maybe you're right. Maybe once this study comes out that actually completely refutes NIST and says, yes, there was a controlled demolition, maybe then people will go, oh, wait a minute, there's something more behind it. But here we are, 15 years, never-ending war. This is the 15th time that Obama has reinstated the state of emergency. No question from Congress. I know I hate to look like a conspiracy theory here, but they've got everything they want. And how are we have the evidence? Are we going to be able to bring a case against anybody?
It's a difficult question to answer, and that was sort of the main subject of this conference. The conference was called Justice in Focus, and so we had a lot of attorneys there. Some who are pretty famous attorneys who've done a lot of like public interest and high profile cases, discussing what are the most viable avenues to bringing this case forward, either in a civil suit or through in the criminal judicial system. And there's no easy answer. They had different ideas. I think that there is a feeling that civil action would be the most viable, because with trying to get, you could compile and package all this evidence and try to give it to a prosecutor, but getting a DA or a federal prosecutor to actually do an investigation, unlikely, and to impanel a grand jury is pretty unlikely in this current setting, in the current context.
Which continues, which unabated.
Yeah. And so I think a civil action is, we might see a civil action. I think a civil action is on the horizon. You have family members of 9/11 victims as an obvious class of plaintiffs. And one thing that we've really just started discussing recently is that you have actually thousands of first responders and other people that were down near the World Trade Center site who are dying, who have cancer or other illnesses related to the destruction of the buildings. And if you can prove that the destruction of the buildings was a controlled demolition and somebody had to have done it, they are the cause of all these people's illness. And so this is another possible class of plaintiffs. And bringing a case like that forward, you're going to run into all sorts of obstacles that judges are going to throw at you unless you happen to get very lucky and have a good judge. And so for it to be successful, we need to have a much greater level of awareness, and there needs to be a greater level of public support for this cause. And we know that there's, I think there's a sort of a slowly growing awareness, a slowly growing openness to this, but it's not fast enough. And right now, in all likelihood, this will become another JFK, where 50 years from now, okay, 2/3 of the population believes that it was an inside job. But we don't want another JFK. We want to bring this to closure sooner. And we want, yes, they have gotten, whoever did this got what they wanted. They got exactly what they wanted as a result of doing 9/11. But if we bring this to justice soon, say in the next 5-10 years, it can still, it's not too late for that to have a dramatic impact on the way that our country is governed, and a deep cultural shift, I think, that would result from it. And so, whereas if it's 50, 75, 100 years from now that this is, the popular opinion, then it won't mean anything. So, so we have to work on all fronts. We have to continue doing what we're doing. It looks like the 9/11 Truth Movement is turning a corner in terms of involving lawyers and trying to prosecute this case. Although a case already has been tried. Bill Veal, who represented Abel Gallup, a Pentagon survivor, they sued Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, and General Richard Myers back in 2007, 2008. And
that's them.
That got that didn't go well for Mr. Veal. He was reprimanded by the courts. They called him basically a crazy conspiracy theorist and threw out the case. So we have to be very careful for a new case to not meet a similar fate, and we have to have a greater level of public awareness and interest in this issue. And so we're working every day to make that happen. It's an uphill battle.
Sure.
Chances are small, but I continue to have hope. Otherwise I wouldn't be doing it. And I also know that it's the right thing to be doing. So.
Well, I appreciate what you're doing. I certainly do. That you are still in the game and looking for answers. And I'm hoping that more people, more young people, Eric and your age and Rich's age, that they start to look at this again and not give up on the fact that there's some evidence that's really staring us in the face, and we don't really know what happened. And there's been no criminal investigation of one of the greatest crimes. Yeah, go ahead, Ted.
Yeah, and I'm curious about that because I meet so many young people, like my cousin's age. My cousins were like 10 years younger than me, like 24, 25, and their friends, like, they all know about this. A lot of them do. It's not like, but getting them, and they care. Like, one of my cousin's friends was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe what you do. Like, amazing." But like, they haven't really become a part of the 9/11 truth movement in a weird way. Like, the 9/11 truth movement is pretty much only comprised of people that were adults when 9/11 happened.
Right.
So Dave and I had this conversation. I told him, just to be completely honest, Alex Jones turned me off from the truth movement, to be honest. That's kind of where, and there's conspiracies behind Alex Jones in its own right. But that's really what kind of turned me off is, at first he made a lot of logical arguments. And then, when you hear some of his other arguments about other things, it kind of made me want to distance myself from his arguments. And I told Dave, it didn't mean that I didn't believe that there was more answers to be had. And I think just today alone and the last week, just re-looking into all this, it definitely has re-enlightened me and re-impassioned me. So that's a good thing. But yeah, think people like Alex Jones, I think, I don't believe in lizard people, and I didn't want to be identified as someone who believed in lizard people, and so I think with people like you, Ted, and Dave, that are more logical and don't seem insane like Alex does.
I'm insane. I'm insane, but I love a good conspiracy theory. But we're being sold a conspiracy theory. So all it is what people agree on happened is no longer a conspiracy theory, even though it had to do with a bunch of people committing a crime, which is what a conspiracy is. So we are being told to believe a conspiracy theory, and a lot of people don't know exactly what the Building 7. What's that? We have to stay vigilant, not to take a term from this global war on terror, which I don't think is going anywhere, Ted. So, hopefully you're right. In 5-10 years, we're still going to be fighting this mythical, enemy with no state actor to go after globally. And, hopefully there will be at least still some interest in maybe getting back our democracy and our civil liberties, which seem to be at a loss at this point. So, Richard, any final comments or question? No, unmute.
I've been off today. I thought it was some very interesting stuff, and as of now, I did a little bit of research going into this, and I had delved into the ideas that the 9/11 story wasn't complete or we weren't getting the truth, but obviously, as Eric highlighted, had been kind of pushed away due to the connections to other conspiracy theories and getting lumped in with that idea. And so, but now, as of now, and based off of what I had seen before, I'm going to need a very much better explanation from whoever's willing to give it about how the World Trade Center 7 collapses due to fire. Because I'm having a really hard time wrapping my head around how that could happen. And with yourself and the group that you're aligned with, having that many people that have that dissent, and as you described, the people that disagree with that dissent aren't really articulating a very sound argument against it, and they're not giving you a detailed explanation about how this central column was deformed in this way and caused this type of that's not the type of case that you're getting in response. So as a result of that, until I see some better evidence, I have to say that fire didn't bring down the World Trade Center 7.
Converted.
In my opinion.
We did it, Eric. We convinced one. Ted, thank you. Awesome. Eric, any final comments or questions for Ted? We're definitely going to have you back, Ted, to keep us updated, because we're not going to, this is some real science. We're going to get our physicist. We have a physicist and another PhD candidate on board. So we need to get them here and start talking to you again. So we'll get updates from you. But go ahead, Eric. Final comments or question?
I'm just kind of happy right now because I feel almost. Oh man, I can't find the word right now. Richard kind of put me off track a little bit with what he said. I feel like I accomplished something for some reason, and I don't know why.
Well, we're trying to. This is a grassroots organization. We're trying to find. We came together around politics. This has been something that I have been interested in. Since the day it happened, and I am heartened that there's real science going on. There's a real investigation going on, even though it's been thwarted and fought against by everybody. Including people that just have had enough, we want to grieve, leave us alone kind of attitude. And that's where they got us. That's where they got us. The big lie, to quote, somebody. But I really hope that this is fruitful and we get some good hard evidence that are going to change some minds. Please come back, Ted. Let's talk about it some more. And we will keep track of the videos and all the releases. I will get all the links that we've talked about today for videos, and I'll put it in the description. But really, thanks very much. And can you leave us with some parting words on this 15th anniversary?
Well, first off, I want to thank you and say that it's been very fun, and I would love to come back on. I want actually. This might sound funny, but this is not like. There are so many other important issues, right, besides 9/11. And I think one of the common misconceptions is that 9/11 truth activists think that 9/11 is the only thing that matters. Like everything stems from 9/11. It's this super important issue. Like nothing else is that important. And there's so much other very serious stuff going on that is equal, similar importance. So I want to say that, but 9/11 is incredibly important. It changed our world in a huge way. And it's not too late to move this world in a much better direction if we can get to the bottom of what happened on 9/11. That's pretty much it.
Well, that's those are great words, and I'm right there with you. Hey, if we're here in 30 years with global warming, hopefully we'll have some answers. So I look forward. We look forward to some real answers. We really do, and we do jest a little bit. And sometimes if you don't look at things in a humorous way, that's sometimes a way to get information across, actually. Comedians can get away with a lot with humor. And I think that, and if we don't laugh, we're going to cry. So we need to look at the truth. We need to definitely have perspective of what's going on. This crime really has dominoed into crime after crime after crime with intervention around this planet. Whether it was just someone taking advantage of it by pulling out every law out of the book and passing Patriot Act 1 and 2 and the Military Commissions Act, and let's take out Iraq while we're at it. I mean, General Wesley Clark, he outed the conspiracy. Oh, we're going after Iraq. Oh, guess what? Now we're going to go after these 7 countries. There's 2 left on the list, people, and both of these guys are ready to take them out that are being elected. So this story is not over, and it really all begins on that day when literally everything changed. So Ted, thank you very much. Appreciate everything you're doing. Stay in touch, and we'll see you next time. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thank you guys. Thanks for what you're doing.
We're going to actually, Ted, we're going to play that trailer as we go out. We're going to play that trailer for Justice in Focus and take a little break, and then we'll come back on the other side and talk about what we heard from Mr. Walter. Thanks again, Ted.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
You too.
I was trying to make you a little bit smaller, but we're just gonna.
I wish I was a little bit smaller.
We're just gonna come back the way that is there. So yeah, we just that was good information, I must say.
Yes, it was.
I'm heartened, as I said, by that movement and the fact that they are looking at this in a impartial way. As far as looking at it with a scientific method in mind, as opposed to trying to paint it with the brush of who did this, who was behind it, why. We can find that out once we get some hard evidence that the real story isn't true. And we don't know what happened, and whatever happened, they've used it to completely destroy a lot and kill a lot of people.
I think it's really smart to start with just the most basic question of, did fire bring down the WTC 7 building? And by asking just that simple question, and by focusing on that and whether it's even possible, then if it's determined that it's not reasonably feasible for that, particularly not just any type of building collapse, but for that particular type of collapse to transpire as a result of fires, and then the severity of the fires, whether there's any reason to believe that they were as intense as he mentioned. NIST mentioned at first that that FEMA, I believe, or NIST mentioned at first that they thought the diesel tanks fires played a role, but that idea had been gone by the most recent or last version of NIST's version of what transpired. And so I think that's really wise by focusing just on that, because looking at the information that's available, I don't see how one could come up with a feasible scenario just off the one I was reading off the report. It doesn't seem to make any sense. It seems very like it's missing something significant to explain itself.
Yeah, they were just published actually in a physics magazine too, in an article in a very notable physics magazine, asking these questions not only about Building 7 but also about the two twin towers. So I think Ted's right. I think if we get some hard evidence, maybe it's going to change some minds and maybe look elsewhere, because I think those firemen are going to be a little bit more pissed about what happened that day and how they were used, if that's the case. So I thank you guys for joining me in on this, and we're gonna get Ted back for sure. We're going to get James Corbett on and talk to him about his videos and his what he knows what's going on lately about maybe the criminal investigation and who we really should be looking at. So we'll get him on. He was really busy today, and this was all last minute. So we are doing lots of interesting things here at Project Sanity. We are all over the country. We're grassroots. We're citizen journalists, and we are creating live programming. That's our plan, is to create live programming like this. Tuesday afternoon, 2 Pacific, another episode of The Robust Opposition will be on. We're going to be in, I'm getting a lot of people saying they like that name, by the way, guys. Oh, that's a good name. So the Robust Opposition will be active. Join the opposition on Tuesday, 2 p.m. That'll be a live broadcast. Eric's going to help me on that, but I'll be in the streets of Beverly Hills in front of Seth MacFarlane's house, protesting Hillary Clinton's fundraiser, and also part of the No DAPL a Day of Action, which we hear Bernie Sanders apparently is going to be at the action in New York, Washington. I think it's Washington on the same day. So Tuesday is also a big day of action for the No Dakota Access Pipeline, which of course we talked about a little bit, that it's been stalled, but it's probably not over. But there'll be no violence probably now there for the rest of the election season anyway. And which is probably what they want in the grand scheme of things. So we're going to have lots of programming. Of course, we have our live show, right, Richard, on Thursday night. And are you gonna show up this week or what?
Yeah, I'll be there, and I might actually be partially inspired by this broadcast that Dave put together here with the World Trade Center to talk a little bit more about the political fallout of 9/11 and what it's meant in the last 15 years. And
it's huge. One of the things, I'm sorry to interrupt, but one of the things I wanted to just bring up when Ted was on is that the new move, of course, we talk about these people that weren't born or were born on 9/11. That's the new psyop, the new propaganda tool. Is we're gonna pull all the kids that were born on that day and feed them the narrative and get them to go out and go forward. So this is part of it. This is all part of it. So I'm glad you're going to take a look.
Yeah, and definitely. And what's that? What has it meant for our Middle East policy, and what have we gotten for 15 years of intervening?
What have we gotten, indeed?
Nothing. Now it looks like a lot of dead military members, a lot of dead civilians, which Benjamin pointed out a while back when Bernie was still in the race and everything, that Trump was pretty much one of the only candidates on either side to mention that, you know, these wars kill hundreds of thousands of civilians. And people that aren't engaged, that aren't part of this violence, that aren't part of this, and whether they're part of a belief system that maybe have antithetical views to some of the things that we hold dear in America or not, is separate from whether they deserve to get a bomb dropped on their children for it. And I think it's really important to think about not just the damage that was caused to us, but what have we done in response, and what does that make? How does that make us look to some Joe Schmo who doesn't watch the news that they don't get in their country, and just experiences America from their first person perspective?
Well, it's the response that we do is, it has to be overwhelming, shock and awe, they called it. But it continues with the drone program, with the launch of the drone program, some would say on 9/11.
Also, I imagine it's not a coincidence, but the Siege was airing with Denzel Washington, which was in 1998.
You mentioned
and
that.
It talks a little bit about Islamic terrorism before it was a thing, basically, it was after the World Trade Center bombing, but that didn't get a lot of play or a lot of popularity. Terrorists were still usually Russian or Eastern European of some sort. And so it was one of the big blockbusters that came out on that. But one of the scenes in there, you can probably find it on YouTube, where he talks about the erosion of our civil liberties, and that by torturing, by doing these things, they're winning, and that they've already won. And this was before it all happened. And so I've heard that reiterated since then, and it's just it seemed oddly prescient.
Well, you know what I think, along those lines, Eric, I'll get you in here too, though. But they talk about how Pearl Harbor came out literally the summer before, and that was actually might be part of it, the psyop. And then now what's come out recently, Argo, which is about taking out Iran and being and demonizing Iran. That's one of the theories. But then so is this all part of a giant CIA psyop, and our government will kill 3,000 civilians? They might have been willing to do more. Maybe they got lucky, or they didn't. Maybe they wanted more. I don't know. But they certainly used that tragedy more than any truther has ever used that tragedy. I mean, our government has used 9/11, and you just look at Giuliani's tape. Look at all that tape, of his whole run up in 2008. Our government and these bastards have used 9/11 for more damage than whatever happened than any truther asking for some evidence. So to say we're un-American at any level, being someone who's looking for the truth of what really happened on the crimes of that day, that's unpatriotic. So there.
Yeah, I actually got to take off, guys. But one thing I wanted to say is that regardless of what you believe, and at risk of sounding like I'm promoting RT America, we really
Russian
need to
television?
question more. Yeah, we really need to question more. We can't just believe what we're told. You don't have to believe anything, but don't come to your own conclusions until you have done your research.
Absolutely. And one of the things, as I mentioned, about how the perspective of those. See you later, Eric. Appreciate you joining us. About the perspective from those in the Middle East, and reflecting on our perspective, is one of the justifications we often give for collateral damage in military conflicts is that, well, they are, especially on the right, you'll see a lot of this. Well, they believe this, they believe that, they think that this is bad, that's bad. Or that they think the United States is, doing X, Y, or Z to their country, and when we're really not. And it's like they need to be informed. It's like, so it's on us if we don't want them to use that same justification against us as collateral damage, if they target civilians or if they consider us combatants by merely being participants in the American democratic system. it's our job to ask the questions that need to be asked so that we know what actually happened, so that we're not just blindly following our government telling us a story about these are the bad people and this is why they hate us and this is why you hate them, because they're getting the same thing from their government. And if we expect them to not just swallow what their government's telling them whole, that the United States is the source of all their problems,
right,
then we can't accept our government's explanation that the source of so much turmoil in the world is because of the people or the governments in the Middle East.
Yeah, exactly.
We
can't do it. We'd never be able to do it. Like Bob Barr said, I'd never be able to do it. I should play that one. But Richard, thank you so much, brother. Project Sanity, subscribe to the channel, get notifications when we go live, as we're going to do more live programming. We're going to set up a regular news blast every day, a bit of sanity. That's coming, we swear. So lots of things happening. We're still working on our very special thing happening up in Washington. So subscribe to the channel. I'm DC, Dave Conan at Our Revolution TV. You can find me on Twitter at also ourrevolution.tv. Richard Green?
You can find me at Progressive Green, no E at the end of Progressive, and then just Progressive Green on Twitter. And just make sure to check out projectsanity.org, and that'll lead you back to our YouTube space. Subscribe so you can find out when we're doing those shows that Dave was mentioning. And just thank all of you so much for your patience. And now that our credibility has been demolished, hopefully you guys still continue to tune in.
Yeah, yes, we're complete. Our credibility is completely demolished now that we're truthers.
And so, yeah, hopefully you can keep us in esteem and continue to tune in and share with your friends, family, and other people that you think might be interested in what we've got to say. Thanks so much.
Awesome, Richard. I got to pee.
Dave, for doing all the work you did to get this together.
Hey, man, my pleasure, Rich. Thanks for joining in. I do have to pee, so I'm going to put you out on this video we watched. Thank you all for joining in, and we'll see you next time on Project
9/11. At approximately 5:20 p.m. on September 11, 2001, World Trade Center Building 7 collapsed in 6.5 seconds from normal office fires, according to the government's final report.
World Trade Center 7 collapsed because of fires fueled by office furnishings. It did not collapse from explosives or from fuel oil fires.
Later, the government finally admitted that Building 7 collapsed at the rate of free fall, after trying to deny it. So what's wrong with a building in free fall? What is free fall?
It's just like taking your car keys out and just dropping them. That's how fast the building came down, for over 100 feet.
This is high school physics.
A building cannot do free fall with 40,000 tons of structural steel in its structural system without it being blown up.
The only way that a building can accelerate as it collapses is by having pre-engineered, precisely timed, and precisely placed explosives. In other words, controlled demolition.
Normal office fires not only dropped a steel-framed skyscraper for the first time in history, and did so at free fall, according to the government's report. They also burned hot enough to create the molten metal observed at ground zero.
You'd get down below and you'd see molten steel running down the channel rails, like you're in a foundry.
In an office fire, you cannot generate enough heat to melt steel.
So if you have a flame at 750 degrees, you can hold that flame under a steel beam forever, and you'll never reach a high enough temperature to bend steel, let alone melt it.
First of all, let's go back to your basic premise that there was a pool of molten steel.
Like lava.
Like it was
like lava
from a volcano.
I know of absolutely nobody, no eyewitness who said so, nobody who's produced it.
John Gross categorically denied their observations. He not only ignored evidence, he denied evidence.
The government acknowledged that Building 7's collapse was unprecedented. Engineers were also stunned. Yet somehow, news networks and many others knew it was going to happen. CNN reported the collapse an hour before it happened.
We are getting information now that one of the other buildings, Building 7 in the World Trade Center complex, is on fire and has either collapsed or is collapsing.
And a few blocks away,
Keep your eye on that building, it'll be coming down. The building is about to blow up. Moving back.
Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York.
The BBC even reported the collapse in detail live from New York over 20 minutes before it happened, with Building 7 still standing in the background. Immediately after Building 7's collapse, FDNY Lieutenant David Restuccio had this to say.
We had heard reports that the building was unstable and that it eventually would either come down on its own or it would be taken down.
CBS veteran anchorman Dan Rather and others also had their first impressions, which were only broadcast on that tragic day.
For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
And I turned in time to see what looked like a skyscraper implosion. It looked like it had been done by a demolition crew. The whole thing just collapsing down on itself.
You don't need to be an engineer or an architect to see what happened to those buildings.
The most obvious hypothesis for anyone looking at the films is that the buildings came down because there was very carefully controlled demolition with high explosives that had been planted weeks, if not months, before.
9/11 claimed thousands of lives and touched millions more. It led us into 2 wars and was used to scale back our civil liberties and invade our privacy. But many people are beginning to question what we were told, and we are demanding answers. So how do we do it? We find our own voices and then we raise them together.
There's been hatred, there's been fear, but there's been no justice for the people who were killed on that day. We must have an inquiry to find out what really happened.
The official accounts of 9/11 are false.
This is so important that you've got to put your usual sources on hold for a while.
You take it slowly, just slowly digest it, slowly accept it.
When the most likely hypothesis in the case of Building 7 wasn't even mentioned.
They didn't talk about Building 7. Nobody mentioned it. And it wasn't hit by planes. So why did it go down?
What I want to persuade you to do is look into it, right? And make up your own mind.
Rethink 9/11.
Rethink 9/11!
Perth, Australia supports.
Rethink 9/11!
Join us and millions around the world who are now learning about the evidence and uniting to rethink 9/11.